Good day and welcome to another exciting episode of WEDCOnomics, brought to you by Wentworth Economic Development Corporation. I'm Jack Terrill, I'm the Executive Director, and also brought to you by Wolfeboro Community TV, your community resource for what's happening in and about the region we all love and live in. So, welcome. Thanks for coming in. This is Episode 4, Season 2, and really excited to have a special guest today, Peter Hoag of PC Hoag and Company. Peter is an arborist.
That's correct.
And also the proprietor and owner of PC Hoag and Company. We're going to talk about trees today, and I'm really looking forward to that. Peter, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Jack. Appreciate it.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about PC Hoag and Company, a little bit of the history and what you guys do and what you focus on.
Well, we started in 1976. I graduated in UNH in 76 with a degree in botany. And I had been in the arboricultural business briefly with another national company, so I had a little bit of an understanding of it. But then I went to school for botany, and that became pretty substantial in terms of what I wanted to do.
So botany is a natural road to what you're doing.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Arboriculture is just another expansion of botany where it has to do with just trees and plants. And when I got out of college, I found out about an individual. His name is Dr. Alex Shigo. He worked at the Forest Service labs in Mass Road in Durham. And he is called the guru of trees, and he is to this day. And I called him up and I asked to come see him with a friend of mine. And so we went and visited him. He's the only scientist at the time who was doing longitudinal dissections of trees rather than cross-sectional.
So cross-sectional is like this?
Around this, down the log, and then longitudinally is take the log and go lengthwise and then open up like a book.
Okay, and so how does
so that opened up all kinds of new information that we didn't have before, like how branches are attached, how trees deal with wounding, and how they compartmentalize the wounding. All that stuff came from Dr. Shigo.
Wow.
And so when I learned this, and
so you knew Dr. Shigo?
No, I never. I met him that day.
Yeah.
At the lab, and then he was so animated in terms of his knowledge, I became completely enamored, and I just wanted to keep doing what I was doing. I just realized that this is where I need to be.
So that's kind of your epiphany when you said, hey, this might be my life's work, based on the inspiration you got from Dr. Shigo.
That's pretty much it.
And he's still alive?
No, he passed away in 2006.
He did?
Yeah. His work is still in play. There's a website called shigoandtrees.com. All of his peer-reviewed scientific journals, his books, everything is on that website. So it's a great opportunity for people to get access for sure.
All right, so you decide, all right, I'm really into trees. And did you go work for a tree company, or did you start up your business?
Well, before I even went to college, I worked for a national tree company. And it was a very short stint. It was probably maybe 4 months or something like that. But then after I did it, and the summers I had a friend that we worked in the business. We could have did some stuff during the summer months. And that just kind of kept going. And then my friend, decided to do something different, but I was still doing it. I was still in college, and in the summer I'd still do the work because I had clients who would call me up. And then I saw Al, and after I saw Al, it was like, well, okay, this is pretty much a no-brainer. I want to continue doing what I'm doing. And he really I would spend time with him every year after that. We would spend 2 days of the dissection labs for years and years and years, and just go over plants and trees and how they defend themselves, how they stand up, how they fall down, how they manage growth, all of that.
So at what point did you decide to go into or start your own business?
Well, it was shortly after I got out of college. My wife graduated with a degree in botany as well.
So she's got a degree in botany? Yeah. Can you imagine those dinner time conversations, folks?
And so, and she actually worked in the field for a year and a half, and then we were having kids, so that took care of that situation. And I then started hiring people to take her place, and it just kind of fell into that realm. I never really gave it a lot of thought. I just did it, and that's kind of where there were some mistakes in that respect, because I should have planned a little bit better. But I did what was happening at the time.
Are you telling me you moved forward without a business plan, sir?
We're going to get to that, aren't we?
You bet
We're going to get to that.
You bet we are. This is WEDCO.
Yeah, that's right. So it was, and then the first 10 years were pretty brutal. And I would admit
But you had some clients based on your
Yes.
college years and your summer work, and
Yeah.
so you had some following.
Yes, I did.
And they probably carried you through the lean.
They did, and there were it was a rough point in time. It's one of the biggest mistakes people make in business.
Which is what?
Don't plan. If you don't plan, it's not going to go well for you.
You hear that,
Believe me.
right?
So yeah, it was the first 10 years was really rough.
But you were following your bliss, your
I was
passion.
following it exactly right, but I was getting beat up pretty hard. So
Yeah.
and then I happened to go to a meeting. I've always been involved with the industry associations, because they're a really great resource. And there was a seminar was put out by one of the largest tree companies, Davey Tree out of Ohio, and they were talking about coming up with your break-even analysis. The light bulb went off.
Or on.
And so I went to that meeting, and it was the most enlightening day of my life.
That is really cool.
Yeah, in fact,
Just because how many people truly understand break-even analysis? It's tricky. It's not as easy as it sounds.
No, it is not. And if you don't pay attention, you can get beat up pretty quickly. And I did. And so, but going through that was really, really great. It was an eye-opener. It helped me move forward. But again, I was not a business person. I'm a plant person. I'm a tree person.
You're a botanist.
So, you can get all that information, you can institute it, you can plan it, but then if you don't keep planning and you don't keep doing, if you just let it roll, it doesn't work the way it's supposed to work. You work the business doesn't work you. That's the problem. And in order to do that, you have to have those things in order beginning with. You just can't, because then you're shuffling, constantly shuffling, trying to make it work. And that's why you got involved.
So that's a couple points on that. The break-even analysis, that's huge.
Yeah.
And that is a critical piece for long-term success. So you got to know that. You got to know your true break-even point, just as you got to know your true north. And the other thing that you brought up is you stayed connected via industry associations.
Absolutely.
And that has played
Oh,
a
absolutely.
major role
Oh,
for
absolutely.
you.
I am in favor of all of that.
Yeah.
I even had clients that I would talk to that would give me advice. If you don't pay attention, it's not going to go well,
No, it's
And
not.
I always listened to my clients, and when they said something, I would put it in my little head. I mean, simple things like making sure that you call a client back as fast as you can is a very important task, and it's really important for us to do that.
It's also shocking the number of folks out there that don't consider that super critical to success.
It is the number one
But
thing.
it's so simple.
Yeah.
You call them back.
If you call them back and just say, listen, Mrs. Jones, I appreciate your call. I can't get here today. Next week I can get there. Or I need to call you back next week with another date. Would that be okay? Solves the problem. I mean, I can tell you, I don't know how many people have told me they never get phone calls back. It's been going on for, I'm doing 48 years now, I think.
48 years.
So yeah, that's been a really important part. And listening to the people that, have advice. Don't take it for granted.
Well, I think guys, we've got a whole litany here of keys to success. Industry associations, calling people back, listening, and also what you touched on is know your limitations. If you're not a marketer, then find a marketer. If you're not an accountant, then find an accountant. Just know your limitations, and just as any manager or coach wants to put the best team on the field for success, they don't put a lineman in the cornerback position. You put your best,
Right.
given the positions what you need. So these are all great lessons. Appreciate you sharing that stuff.
Well, it's been probably the most difficult part of our operation. I mean, I made mistakes that created a little bit of a problem, a big problem, and we're getting out of it, but I could have solved that a long time ago. I would have been in this position if I had done things differently.
Right.
But that's just part of the nature of the bit.
And mistakes will be made, no matter
what.
No matter what. And if you're not making mistakes, you're not trying
That's
hard
right.
enough. You're not.
Totally.
You're not.
I agree with that 100%.
Trying hard enough. Mistakes are just part of the process, just as falling down when you learn to ski is part of the process.
There isn't really failure, there's an outcome. If you are using information and you make a decision and the outcome doesn't work the way you wanted, well, it's just you made the wrong assumptions. That's all. Failure doesn't, people use the term failure and it's really not true.
Right.
Because you don't
It's
fail,
experience.
and you just make mistakes and then you get back up and try it again.
If you learn from
If
those
you learn,
mistakes.
if you don't, well then that's part of the problem.
So let's drill down on PC Hoag a little bit, because it's not a tree removal service as much as it is a healthcare.
Right,
center.
tree and plant healthcare company, right. That's
Right.
and we do removals, that's part of our job, but we're not a removal company. We're trying to preserve as many of the heritage trees we have, some natural areas. We have huge amounts of development, changes in our environment. Weather is creating all kinds of havoc. And, the trees that we have around here now are aging out. They're well over 200 years old. Some of them are getting damaged due to salt and other damage not being taken care of. So we're seeing a major change in our urban canopy, so to speak, much more than you've seen in the last 50 to 100 years.
You said urban. What about rural? Is there a
Urban
change?
and rural.
Urban and rural.
Because we live in an urban rural area. Back in 1979, I worked as a consultant for the urban forestry program where I would identify assets in a community and get them protected, street trees, park trees, that sort of thing. And we have lost that completely. If you drive anywhere in the state of New Hampshire on any major thoroughfares, you will not see very many large heritage trees along our highways, along our roads, in our communities.
What do you mean by heritage trees?
Older trees, large older trees, well over 100, 150, 200-year-old trees.
Are there any left in New Hampshire?
Oh, there's some of them, but they're having a problem with all the development and also the salt and other things like that. I mean, when you get into an urban site, trees, the biggest problem we have is trees have been here forever. They're the oldest, largest living organisms on the planet. And so we just take them for granted. So we build a road, we pave the road, the trees are there, they still grow, they don't die. Everybody thinks they're going to be taken care of. As a young tree's basically 100% living. As it goes into reproduction, it starts to lose its amount of living cells. So as it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, it has less resources to maintain the system. And that's why it's important to take care of them so that they have something for later on. Otherwise, when you get droughts or excessive water, those are stresses on the plant, and the plant has to respond to it.
And if they're ill-equipped to respond,
there's a slow decline in the tree. The tree is a giant, is basically made up of sugar, and as the tree grows, it uses the nitrogen and the phosphorus and the potassium, creates sugar, and that builds its tissue. But then if it doesn't have all those things, it'll start to shed branches. And as it sheds, then other organisms move in to decay that wood, natural occurring fungi and other organisms, and eventually the tree will give up because it doesn't have enough resources to keep growing.
Can you nurse a tree back to health, a sick tree back to health?
Depends on how far it's gone.
And how do you determine how far it's gone?
It's kind of an experiential thing. You have to see how much crown is still left, if there's any green material in the crown.
What do you mean by the crown?
The crown is the upper part of the tree where all the leaves are basically.
Yeah.
So that is kind of it's the area that tells you what's going on. If you see a real healthy green crown, then the tree is doing what it's supposed to. If it's really not green, discolored, yellowish, has a lot of dieback in it, that means it's a weak tree. It doesn't have the nutrients it needs, doesn't get the water it needs. Probably some root injury. Many times you'll get root injury, and if the root dies, it'll affect the top of the tree.
What are some aspects of root injury? What causes root injury?
Lawnmowers, compaction from vehicles, driving a truck over root systems,
It
salt
breaks
damage.
their roots.
There's mostly the biggest issue we have with soils and roots in basically in almost any site, whether it's rural or urban, is compaction, soil compaction, and root compaction. So there isn't a natural occurring association with the fungi to the roots, and that's called mycorrhizal association, and that fungi goes out, picks up minerals, and brings it back to the tree, and in turn the tree gives the fungus carbohydrates. When large equipment or even foot traffic, in fact in the National Mall, they have difficulty managing the trees there because of foot traffic. A person's foot, an average person weighs 200 pounds, it's 100 pounds per square foot if you think about that.
Right.
And if you take 10,000 people in a certain area, well, you've got a lot of compaction. So that is part of the whole process of making sure that a tree can withstand those issues that are being put on it. Normally, it lives in the woods or lives in the forest, and the leaves fall down in the fall. They create a blanket, and over the winter months, that blanket decomposes, and those minerals are released to the roots, and then the tree picks up those minerals, and then in the spring, the growth starts all over again. So compaction is a real super problem. But if you know that, well, there is a test. We do have a test, actually, to check the health of a tree, and that's using it's basically potassium iodine, and it's called I2KI, which is a starch, basically checking for starch. And you can drop it on a root, or you can drop it on a stem, and but it turns it purple. That means it has a high starch content.
Which is good,
Very good.
because that leads to sugar, right?
Yes, that means it has storage capacity in the plant. So then, if you know that, that gives you a good sense, kind of a background information. And then you can look around and see what's going on in terms of the actual physical situation and say, okay, well, you're driving, your truck around here all the time. Do you need to drive it on this area? Maybe you should not drive it here. Let's move it over here, and maybe there's pavement bit, maybe there's just dirt. Let's get rid of the dirt. Let's add some organic material in there, like leaves or chips. Make the area turn it back into what would look like in the forest.
So wood chips would be a
Wood chips are very good for that.
So you look at a tree and you determine that it's not doing good. We can't get it back to good health. Is it better to let that tree die where it is, or is it better to remove that tree, that dying tree?
I prefer, depending on the targets that you have in a certain location, because targets are the issue. If you have a dead tree in a public space, you have to be aware of whether, and even in a private space for that matter, you have to be aware of personal injury, property damage, that sort of thing. But we also believe that if the tree is dying, there is such a thing as called retrenchment. So in Europe, the trees are 600, 800, 900 years old. those trees, when they get really big, they don't grow vertically as much. They start to grow vertically, and instead they grow horizontally. They put more growth down in the main stem, and they kind of get fatter. And that actually is a way to manage the tree without cutting the tree down. And so in some cases, we actually did this over in Moulton, but we had a really large, it's got to be 250-year-old maple.
Really?
Oh, yeah. And it had been declining since I've been working in the business. It's been there. We'd worked on it 40-plus years ago. But we just did some work on it, and the discussion was, do we take it down or do we retrench it? And we retrenched it. We didn't take it down. So basically we cut out the areas that were going to be potentially a failure point. And we removed those and left the other part, which is still healthy and green. But it's much shorter now, and it won't cause a problem with failure if there is a weak part in the stem.
So you'll monitor that tree and see how it's responding to that.
We
that
are actually gonna do a treatment with a slow release organic fertilizer, and then already this year I'm gonna get some pictures of it this year because it looks beautiful.
So your preference, if there was no danger to property or people, is to leave the dying tree in place?
It all depends on each situation. There's sometimes when it works to do that you can leave it and then maybe plant another tree somewhere near it so that when the time comes you have you can move out and move that tree and then let the other one come up. There are some times when it's just not going to work.
Yeah.
It's time to move. And so I look at it like, okay, there's a point in time when the tree deserves to die with dignity and not let it, kind of just fall apart. It's time to say, okay, you've done your job, it's time to take you out, and we'll get another tree and put back in its place. That's a legitimate thing. My only thing is that we have a tendency to cut really big trees for no reason. In other words, even if they're in an area where they don't have a problem falling on anything, just to let them go and be by themselves and decline on their own. I mean,
isn't there a desire for the board feet that are
well,
within?
some of the old wood, there's spalted wood in it that could be used for sure. Those are good things. Certainly not firewood. The most important thing right now is letting things.
Firewood should be gathered on the ground?
Well, yeah, it's just that one issue with trees is it holds carbon, and we're trying to reduce the amount of carbon that's being released. And so decomposition is a release of carbon. Burning is a real quick release of carbon. Making furniture is not a release of carbon, right? So those are the three things that you can look at, where you can say, if I was to have this tree, I would much prefer to put it in the furniture rather than firewood. And I'd much rather let it just stand here and die on its own than put it into firewood.
Because it's a more controlled release of whatever carbon's going to come out.
Yeah.
If I'm walking in the woods, I see a tree. This tree's got a little moss on it. This tree's got a little fungus on it. Is that an indicator of anything, or?
Oh yeah, the trees are a host.
Yeah. So it's not necessarily a bad thing that they have.
No. So it's very interesting how nature works, this whole deal, because actually the tree is the foundation of all of nature, right? I mean, that's what makes up the forest, are trees, and then your associates, understory plants, and then all the microorganisms that live in the forest soil. So they are growing, and they're all genetically diverse. Genetically, they're not the same species. They're not cloned. So you're going to have variations throughout the forest, and you will have individuals that are stronger than other individuals. And those individuals, the stronger ones, will be less likely to have an impact from a fungus, or an insect. But there are different types of fungi that live in the trees. They're always there, and they won't kill their host, because if they kill their host, they're dead too.
Yeah, okay.
So there's one in particular that hits white pine, and it's called red rot. And it's a pretty bad fungus in terms of the quality of the wood for timber, but as far as causing a problem with the tree itself over time, it stays in its little zone and doesn't affect the whole tree overall. So there's multiple, like for instance, Al used to talk about birch trees, and if you look at a cross section of a round birch log, and you look at the growth rings, and you'll see a little tiny black speck in the growth ring. That's a fly that comes in the spring, and it comes in the top of the tree and gets inside the cambium layer and follows the cambium layer down the tree.
Yeah.
And it's eating the cambium layer because it's high in nitrogen compounds and sugar. Well, then the tree is starting to form this is coming out of the winter months, and at this point, the cambium layer is kind of like a gel, so it hasn't firmed up yet. So the insect can go through, and what ends up happening is it's supposed to go all the way down and exit through the roots. Well, sometimes it gets caught in the tree, and those black specks are those flies.
No kidding.
So there is.
Are they damaging the tree when they're doing that?
No. Well, the question is, what is the damage, right? I mean, not really.
Yeah.
I mean, it's disrupting. You could say it's disrupting something, but it's not. I mean, damage. What Al used to say, there's 3 Ds. He says, I'm going to forget those. Dysfunction. Anyway. But there's 3, but the whole point is that it's not causing so much of a problem for the plant that it can't handle it. I mean, in other words, the trees have such incredible abilities to wall off all these infections. That's what it does. It compartmentalizes it, walls it off. So as soon as it's there, it says, oh, I don't care about you. You're inside of me, and you can't do anything.
Interesting.
So yeah, it's pretty interesting how the tree operates.
I got a couple questions, and it appears that at some point we're going to have you back on for part 2, because I don't know about you out there, but I think this is fascinating. But one, how would you rate the health of our New Hampshire forests today versus what they were 50 years ago?
I would. Well, there's 2 types of forests here. There's the woodland forest, and then there's the urban forest. So my work involves mostly the urban forest, right? Trees in communities. I would say that it's in a pretty bad situation right now.
The urban forest.
Yeah, the urban forest is hurting. There's a lot of removals for no reason at all. There's no planting going on in terms of urban tree planting in communities.
Why is that?
I don't really know.
Budgetary reasons?
I suspect budgetary, but I also don't think. I question whether there has ever been a discussion for many of these communities exactly what the value of their natural resources are. I don't think anybody has done that. Looked at the
actually
economics.
Assigned an economic value to
totally.
the trees.
So there's a lot of data out there as far as that's concerned. There's a tool called iTree Tools put out by the Forest Service that goes into the great detail about that. Oh, I should mention this too, because it's a really important part of what I'm talking about. There was a report that was done in 2005 by the World Bank, and it's called the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment, and it has to do with the economics of natural resources throughout the world and how they play out. And we don't have any of that information. That is not in our economics. When it tells you, give you an example. We know how much bees pollinate, what the value of that is. But yet, what protection do we have for bees, right? That's just one item. And then you look at the seafood, right? You look at the shorelines. We've gotten rid of all of our shoreline protection, mangrove swamps, all these barrier islands. And now it's wiping out all kinds of fisheries. It's causing all kinds of problems. Our natural resources are huge, and they do so much work for us that we do not put them in the right category for economic benefits, really.
And that is where we're going to pick up for part 2 somewhere down the line. Pete, you'll come back, right?
Oh yeah, I'll come
This
back.
was easy, wasn't
It
it?
was fun.
Guy loves to talk about trees, and he's a client of WEDCO, and I can tell you that we were thrilled to be a part of your organization and to help out.
I gotta tell you, I am absolutely more than thrilled. If it wasn't for you folks, it'd have been a difficult road to hoe. So I appreciate everything that's gone on by WEDCO. I absolutely do. An incredible organization.
Peter Hoag, PC Hoag and Company, arborist. You got any questions? Look him up, PC Hoag, H-O-A-G. And I'm sure Pete would love to talk trees with you.
Oh yeah, anytime.
And I'm Jack Terrill, Executive Director of Wentworth Economic Development Corporation. Our mission is to advise, finance, and promote small businesses here in the Eastern Lakes region. And Peter is one example of that, of many.
Really appreciate it.
And hope you enjoyed the show, and he will be back. I got more questions to ask, including why don't second growth grow as big as first growth? But that'll be next time. So
All right.
we'll
Excellent,
talk
Jack.
then. Thanks
Thanks
Pete.
so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Have a good day.